How's everybody doing? Yahoo! Thanks for coming. So tonight is the Kids Read Comics Kickoff event. Kids Read Comics starts tomorrow in Chelsea, so be sure to check that out over the weekend. Going to be a really special event. Thank you all for coming, and also today we start our summer reading game here at the Ann Arbor District Library, and as a result, one of the things that we have is you can redeem codes when you attend events and get points, and then starting on July 5th, you'll be able to trade in those points for great stuff in our AADL summer game shop. So tonight's code for this event is Yay Smile. Yay Smile. So if you take the code Yay Smile and go to play.aadl.org, create an account, and enter the code, you'll get 400 points toward great stuff. And we had a really nice short code, but AT&T didn't get it activated yet. Imagine that. So it's not quite ready, but that's coming. So Yay Smile, you got a week to enter the code, and then you'll be all set. So I'd now like to introduce our presenters for this evening. It's a husband and wife team that is monsters in the world of comics. They do some really amazing book. We've got Smile and Astronaut Academy are two of their newest books. They're both fantastic works. Please join me in welcoming Dave Roman and Raina Telgemeier.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves. So for those of you who don't know who we are, which is like 3 of you, and then we're also going to do some live reading. And then later, our friend Kevin's going to show up with some puppets, and who knows what will happen then. But it should be fun. So, without further ado, A Life of Comics. A PowerPoint presentation told in 3 panels. Panel 1, words and pictures equals influences and inspiration. That means we're going to talk about stuff in the past. So Raina and I were born on the exact same day in the exact same year, 1977, except we were born on different coasts of the United States. I was born on Long Island in New York.
San Francisco, California. Yay.
Anyone? And we both grew up loving comic strips.
Woo!
Yes, please shout out if you see something you like. So, comic strips, remember the newspaper? They were great. We started reading comic strips in the newspaper and then got the book collections. My first comic strip collection, it was actually a scan of it. I got through the school book clubs, and then I started going to the library, and the library had this really great collection of comic strip collections, and what was great about that is not only could I read all my favorite comic strips that were in the newspaper, I discovered comic strips that were not carried in our newspaper, which was like, who's getting to read these comics that I don't get to read on a daily basis? But luckily, we got to read them in book collections. Calvin and Hobbes, obviously a big one. Raina can talk a little bit about For Better, For Worse.
Or can I?
Can you?
It's
can you
awesome.
Not? Yeah. Of course, we loved cartoons. Who doesn't love cartoons? My favorite cartoons growing up were actually the cartoons based off comic strips. So the Garfields, there actually was like a Doonesbury special. There was a Far Side special when I was a kid. Marvin got an animated special. These were like a big deal to me because I loved comic strips. And then when I saw them on TV, it was like doubly
And one of my favorite cartoon shows was The Smurfs, which I did not realize was based on comics that were produced in, Belgium? Yes. By Peyo?
Yes. So I'm sorry that Jersey's not here because this is a big little thing for him. But so loved watching cartoon shows, and my favorite afternoon cartoon shows were G.I. Joe and the Transformers. And the thing about these shows is they were 30 minutes, and they sort of followed a formula. And every episode, you kind of knew that there was like a rising and falling action, and you knew that the bad guys were always going to get away, the good guys were going to win. It was very comforting in that way, but also very safe. To my surprise, I went over a friend's house, and he had this comic book here called G.I. Joe and the Transformers, and on the cover, Bumblebee, the nicest and most friendliest of the Transformers, is getting blown to pieces by the G.I. Joe force, which are also good guys. So good guys blowing up good guys. This is very complicated to a small child who is used to everything sort of working in a formula, and it told me instantly, comics can do things that TV can't, and there's this really magical world where people are allowed to have a little bit more freedom, I guess, or they can just mess with kids' minds. So I started devouring comic books, all the usual favorites that people would know: Spider-Man, Batman. I was very fond of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this is another example of how I started noticing that things in the comics were very different than in TV. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had their own cartoon show at the time, and the cartoon show, they were really sort of friendly. They hung out a lot. They ate a lot of pizza. They talked like surfer dudes. But they never seemed to use the weapons that they had, and even though they were called Ninja Turtles, there didn't seem to be anything tying them to ninja philosophy or anything. Whereas in the comics, they actually did act like real ninjas. There was this sort of strange spirituality to it. The action seemed real, and everything about it just seemed more gritty. And as a teenager growing up, teenage boys want things gritty. They want things like, oh, that's edgy, man. So again, comics to me were like edgier, cooler than TV.
And one of my big influences when I was growing up was manga. And the first manga that I ever read was this book called Barefoot Gen, which my dad had seen me reading comic strips and watching a lot of cartoons. And he was like, oh, maybe Raina will like this book about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima in World War II. Hey! So he handed me Barefoot Gen to read, and I started to read it, and I started to like the characters. I started to enjoy the kids' adventures, and then they all died when the atomic bomb fell on their city at the end of Volume 1. And I was really, really devastated when I read this and kind of could not believe that something so tragic had just happened in a comic book. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that comics, like Dave said, could tell crazy stories and could tell stories unlike anything else you'd ever seen or read. And it kind of just opened my mind to that concept. Not necessarily that everybody has to die at the end of the book, but that you can tell sad, true, funny, any kind of story can be in a comic. And so I started to draw my own comics, and here is me on display as a young teen girl writing stories about her daily life. Nothing so tragic as an atomic bomb happened in my life, but there was a slightly tragic incident in my childhood that I did write a story about, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But when I was just experimenting as a cartoonist, I was just drawing conversations that had happened between my friends and I, really badly ripping off Lynn Johnston and the guy that draws Foxtrot, and not drawing word balloons very well, but trying to sort of emulate the Sunday strip in format. And that sort of led into me being a cartoonist for my school newspaper. So this was a cartoon I did about prom dates and which type of prom date are you? And there were lots of funny examples like blind date, haha, and the gossip and go stag, and then a couple of in-jokes that only people that went to my high school would get. And I was in student government in a position called the art commissioner, which meant that I got elected to paint posters for school dances, which was actually the best thing ever. I got to hang out with my friends till 3 a.m. just painting banners for dances and posters and designing stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And I didn't actually take a lot of art classes when I was in school. Oddly enough, in high school I didn't take a single art class, but as you can see, every spare moment of my time was spent creating art in some way, mostly for public consumption. And or making myself Halloween costumes. Yeah.
So I guess around that same time, I, back in New York, was starting to make my own comics as well. And I was making comics that were basically my friends and I going on adventures that were basically parodies of movies that we liked. So Back to the Future, Star Wars, lots of time travel. And so I keep saying we, but it was mostly me. My sister was drawing a little bit of comics at the time. And what I started doing was selling them at the school store. And through that, I started meeting other kids that were interested in comics in my high school. And we started a comic book club. That's a scan from my high school yearbook. So 3 of my friends, we started a comic book club with the English teacher. And the coolest thing about that was that we basically got the school to buy us art supplies and pay for our photocopies so that we could start making comics with someone else's money, which is very nice. So by the time I graduated high school, I knew I probably was not going to be a lawyer. I knew I was probably not going to be a doctor, much to my mom's disappointment. So the only path for me was art school, and I found a school in New York City called the School of Visual Arts, which not only could I take cartooning classes, but they were taught by people, in some cases, that I'd actually heard of. There were people like Art Spiegelman, who did Mouse, was a teacher there. A lot of editors at DC Comics and Marvel Comics taught there. And that was super exciting to me because not only would I learn about comics, but I'd get to meet professional comics people. So what I really wanted to do when I was in art school was paint fantasy novel covers. I love Dragonlance and Dungeons and Dragons, and I really love that sort of realistic. My painting teacher was like, "Oh, you want to be Frank Frazetta?" And at the time, I was like doing watered down copies of Frank Frazetta, not even Frank Frazetta. But it actually went really badly, and I'm going to tell you that I really was horrible. And I wish, at some point I need to find one of my old paintings and scan them and add them to the slideshow, but it didn't work out, and let's just say that. And my painting teacher was very quick to point out that it was not working out, and that he understood what I wanted to do, but it wasn't going to happen. But what he did sort of get excited by, strangely enough, was my notebooks and my sketchbooks, because for some reason I was a compulsive doodler, and I would draw all these like little things in notebooks, and I had all these ideas for stories, and when he would talk to me, he realized, like, so you're really interested in the storytelling more so than like the final art. So I started writing stories, and I started teaming up with other artists, and luckily I was going to art school, so there were a lot of great artists around me, and I ended up teaming up with an artist named John Green, who ended up being my roommate as well. And we did a comic book together called Jack's Epoch and the Quick and Forbidden, which we started self-publishing. It actually started as a project in class, and then we started self-publishing it. And this was really exciting to me because I didn't have to put myself on display. I could sort of hide behind another artist. And it was just great because John could draw things that I didn't feel confident drawing. For example, architecture. My architecture class did not go so well either. Perspective, not my strong suit. Whereas John could, I mean, like, that looks like New York City. It's a great job. So we were in New York City, and one of the coolest things about going to school in New York City is that, like I said, there's professional cartoonists teaching at the school, and there's professional companies in New York City. Marvel and DC, Archie, they're all sort of based in New York. So I was actually able to get an internship working at DC Comics. And my job at the time was sort of helping the editors on the Cartoon Network line of books. So a lot of that involved answering Scooby-Doo's fan mail. Now, it's probably not a big surprise to you that Scooby-Doo would get a lot of fan mail. But what may be surprising is that 90% of it was kids who believed that Scooby-Doo was real. So most of the letters involved requests to Scooby, either asking him to come over, maybe come to their birthday party, maybe help them solve a mystery, maybe do something mean to their brother or get back at them. So a lot of it was writing back to these kids, sort of humoring them and telling them, "Oh, Scooby's really busy. They're off, in the mystery van doing something important." And then I also got to write letter columns, which is really cool, because those were like in the back of the comic books. Kids would write in, and then we'd answer them, and everybody could read them. Through that, I got my first writing gigs, writing Dexter's Laboratory comics, which is based off a cartoon show that I was a big fan of at the time. And that led to me getting a job at Nickelodeon Magazine, which led to me getting my butt on the cover of a magazine that was sold nationally in supermarkets everywhere. Nickelodeon Magazine, rest in peace, was a humor magazine. A lot of what we did was gag cartoons and humor pieces. This is one by Johnny Ryan that I really like. And then, of course, we did cartoons based off cartoon shows that were on Nickelodeon. my favorite of which was Avatar: The Last Airbender, which we'll go into a little bit later. Meanwhile, on the other side of the United States,
Back in California. Don't take that. Thank you. I had this big crush on New York, and I had had a crush on New York since the Sesame Street days, I think. And then I saw Oliver and Company as I was 11, and then I got to go to New York with my family like a year after that, and I was like, I'm going to move here someday. So really, that was just a dream that I had, and it was not concrete until I discovered that there was a school in New York City that had a cartooning program. And I was like, oh, it's my destiny to go to this school with a cartooning program and be an illustration major. You explain it to me, I don't know. My thinking was, well, I know what illustration is. It's making pictures, but I don't really know what cartooning means. I don't know if I want to draw Batman. I don't know if I want to draw a cartoon in the newspaper, like a comic strip. I don't know if I want to be an animator. I didn't know if that was the right path for me, so I thought illustration would be a good starting point. And of course, I got to SBA, and what did I do? I made comics 24/7. In all of my classes where they were like, do a picture, I was like, can I do 4 pictures? I could tell the story better if I could show you multiple images. It's just in my blood to make comics. And so I went about doing so, had some wonderful teachers, took a class with a guy named Joey Cavalieri, who is an editor at DC Comics. And he was really a teacher that took me under his wing and gave me lots of great suggestions. I was working on this story about how I don't like snakes. And Joey liked this, but he was like, you know what? You should be using a brush to make your comics. And I was like, a brush? Why would I use a brush? He was like, what's your favorite comic? And I was like, well, I love Bone by Jeff Smith. He was like, brush. So he encouraged me to pick up a brush and try to emulate Jeff Smith's work a little bit more on my own. And so that's what I did. And I feel like that actually just opened up another huge door for me, which was that the tool could sort of allow me to make the kind of art that I wanted to. So I started to tell really short personal stories via comics. And this is just one example. This is the entire comic. It's only 1 page long. It is about my first cup of tea, which might not sound like a very interesting subject matter to make a comic about, but I wanted to capture a feeling. I wanted to capture the essence of that day in my life when I was a kid, and I wanted to do it in as short a way as possible. So this was the result. And I, as a student, was involved with student government and lots of different clubs and stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to do while I was there was to make sort of a comic event for the comic book students. Because at SVA, comic book students weren't treated badly, but they were never given like top social billing or anything. It was always like, oh, the graphic design students, the illustration students, which I was one of, but I didn't necessarily want to be. The comic students, no one really knew what to do with them. And a lot of us were like making comics, but we didn't have a way to show them to people. We didn't have an event that was all of our own. So I decided to create a student comic convention called the School of Visual Arts Student Comic Expo, or whatever. So yeah, I made this flyer. I invited people. All the cartooning students had tables where we could sell our mini comics and stuff like that. These were my mini comics. And who got invited to this convention but a certain editor at Nickelodeon Magazine?
and let's just say real quick, mini comics, for those of you who don't know, are comic books
yes.
that are made by yourself on a photocopier and then stapled, and then handed to friends, given to friends, sold for 50 cents.
You just took the punch out of that
Sorry, go for it.
slide. That's where we met, which is what I was trying to say. Thanks, Dave.
Sorry.
So Dave and I met at this little student convention that I put together. And he was there as an editor, really just scouting for new talent and looking for people to collaborate and contribute to what he was doing. So he bought one of my mini comics, took it home and read it, and was like, oh, this is cool. And then emailed me a couple of days later to say that he liked it. And the rest is history, as they say. And this is the same way that I actually met my editors at Scholastic. I had been making mini comics for a couple of years, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with them, if I was going to publish them as larger stories or as larger collections of stories, I guess you could say. And then I bumped into the editors at Graphics, which is the comic book imprint at Scholastic, which was just being started at the time. And they liked my work. They liked my minis. They liked what they saw. They said they wanted to work with me, which was really exciting because I had never been published before. So instead of asking me to do my own work, what they ended up saying was, so we've got this property called the Babysitters Club, and what do you think? Would you like to make graphic novels based on this series? And this was like a big favorite series of mine when I was growing up. So I was like, yes, absolutely. That sounds awesome. Wow. So I'm going from publishing 12-page comics to publishing 192-page comics. Yeah, it was a little bit of a learning curve, and I had to learn to draw the characters in my own style, and I had to learn to keep deadlines and stuff like that, but it kind of worked out. And I ended up doing 4 Babysitter's Club books for Scholastic. Those are my covers of the books with the original covers that they're based on. I did an illustration at one point, which was the Babysitter's Club taking care of famous cartoon characters as babies. And maybe we can go through these, and I can see if you guys can tell me who's who. Is this the...
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, okay, cool. So, okay, what about this one down here? Do you recognize
You
this?
just shout it out.
Just shout it out. If you... Yeah, Superman is heating up his bottle with laser vision. Okay, down here in the corner, it's a little hard to see, but this baby has little claws poking out of his knuckles. Wolverine, good. How about this one down here? Dave's big favorite, Ninja Turtle, good. Okay, this baby's got yellow skin and a very tall column of blue hair on top of her head. It is Marge Simpson, yes, as a baby. Okay, this baby is pouring some water out of a sippy cup that's freezing on impact. Frozone, oh, first try, good job. Okay, what about these 2 girls? They are fighting over a little red-headed boy doll. It is Betty and Veronica, and who are they fighting over? Archie. Okay, how about this, where'd it go? I'm not good with this thing. All right, come on. How about this little kitty over here? Garfield. Okay, this girl she's got a magnifying glass. She's not Nancy Drew. She's following a trail of Cheerios out to the porch, and she's looking for someone specific. Velma, and who's that? Scooby, not answering his fan mail. It all ties together. So this little girl might also be a little hard to see. She's got little fins poking out over the side of the pool. Yeah, it's Ariel. Good job. Okay, this baby climbing up some cupboards. Spider-Man. Who else could it be? And finally, there's a baby eating spinach in a high chair. Popeye. Exactly. All right. So that segues us into part 2, which is full-time cartoonists, which is what we both are. I guess I get to talk about Smile now. Smile is my most current graphic novel. It's the first book that I've been both the author and the illustrator of. And speaking of tragic incidents in my childhood, look away if you're squeamish, I'm sorry. When I was 11 years old, I was running around with some friends one evening. I tripped and fell and knocked out my 2 front permanent teeth, which is not a fun thing to do, let me tell you. So these are pictures taken just a month or so after the fact. What they did was they put my 2 front teeth back into my head, but the bone was damaged above the teeth, so they went up a little bit higher than they were supposed to. So as a result, I was sort of a vampire-looking teenager, which is really not what you want when you're 12. So it meant that I had to go through 4.5 years of dental reconstruction, and that meant headgear and braces and fake teeth and all sorts of other stuff to get to looking like this again, which is what I call normal. And in the meantime, I was getting interested in boys. I was interested in dating, and that wasn't working out so well because I felt like a freak. So that's what the story's about. It began its life as a webcomic, which means that I published a page on my website once a week as I was writing it, so people could actually give me feedback. This is what it looked like when it was on the web. It was black and white. If you have a copy of the book, I see some people do. If you turn to page 1, you can compare this page 1 with the current page 1. There are a few changes that have been made. The story does take place in San Francisco, which is where I grew up, and that was kind of fun because it was like a love letter to home in some ways. It was not a love letter to my old friends, who were not really what you'd really call friends, if you want to break it down. These are like the mean girls in my life. They teased me. They called me vampire girl. So anyway, these became characters in the story. So every character in the story is a part of the story in some way. Or every person in my life became a character in the story is what I should have said. I got to draw about my middle school, which was real, and my high school, which was also real, and myself, and my awesome outfits that I used to wear in the 90s. Yeah, acid wash, for those of you who were there. And so yeah, it talks a lot about dentistry. And so this is a page where I'm getting an impression of my mouth made, which means they're taking that sticky stuff and shoving it up in there, and you're kind of gagging as you're waiting for it to harden. Horrible, I heard someone say. Headgear, also horrible. You have to wear it, and it really, really hurts. And I thought I was going to have to wear it to school, which would have been super dorky, but fortunately I did not. I only had to wear it at night. So I had this retainer for a little while with 2 fake teeth in the front, which looked very normal when it was in. So I could walk around and nobody knew what was wrong until I popped it out of my mouth, which I could do anytime I wanted. It's actually sort of fun. And there's a flashback scene to the time I lost my first front tooth at age 6 when you're supposed to lose teeth. But of course with me, nothing is ever normal. I was at a carnival on a moon bounce, and as I was bouncing, I got too close to the side. So when I bounced up and bounced down, my tooth caught on the netting and went flying. And because it was in a gravel parking lot, I never found the tooth. And the way that I work is I don't start with words alone, and I don't start with pictures alone. I start with the 2 of them combined, and that's called a thumbnail. And that means that you are making a very fast, sketchy version of every single page where you're essentially drawing stick figures and then anything they have to say. And that sort of informs the pencils and then the inks. So at the thumbnail stage, I am really just concerned with getting my ideas out of my head and onto paper. And for me, this is the way things come out. And I will actually do an entire book up like this. So I'll do 200 pages that look like this, and then my editors will actually edit from this stage. And it's easier for them to edit from a very simple stage, and then me have to not go forward and draw all the artwork from start to finish before they start editing it. Sorry, that came out wrong. But, so this is my thumbnail, and most of the information that I need is already there. Oh, my teeth are really sore. Oh, cute boy. So distracted that I bang into a locker. And then this is what the finished page looked like. So all of the information that I needed to be there was there, but now I've just spent more time on the artwork. Okay, so thumbnails again, and here's what I use to make those thumbnails: a regular old pencil, some copy paper, and a plastic eraser. And then at the pencil stage, I'm using a regular pencil plus a blue pencil for layout work, and I'm switching to a nicer, thick, smooth paper called Bristol board for that. For inking, I'm very traditional. I use a watercolor brush, an ink, and a marker for straight lines. And this is what it looks like when I'm inking. Fun. Wearing a thermal because it was winter when this picture was taken. And then things get scanned into a computer. And scanners are just a way of taking physical art and making them into digital art. And once I've got something on the computer, I can start to manipulate it in Photoshop, which is nice because you can zoom into things really closely. And I do all of my coloring work on a computer as well. And that is what a finished graphic novel looks like when all is said and done. Depending on the book and the story, that can take me anywhere from a full year to 5 full years to do. Smile was a 5-year project, and the book I'm currently working on is scheduled to be a 2.5-year project. So, meanwhile, once again, back to Dave and his crazy life.
So, meanwhile, while Raina was making graphic novels full-time, I was a full-time 11 to 5:30 employee at Nickelodeon, where I was an editor. So I was working with artists, I was working with writers, colorists. Shout out to Nickelodeon Magazine. But I went to art school, and people were constantly like, dude, didn't you go to art school? When are you going to draw some stuff? But going to art school actually scared me out of being an artist for a little while. Because I went from high school where it's like, oh, in high school you're like the best artist in school, hooray! And then suddenly you're in art school and everybody's an artist, and everybody's an amazing artist. So suddenly I went from the amazing artist to just, oh, he's pretty good, all right. And the key I found was I had to develop my own style. I had to find a way that I drew that I could be confident in my own skin. And that sort of just meant stop copying the things that I grew up admiring and obsessing over and just sort of go internal. And I found that I had a much more cartoony style. I had a style that actually was closer to the comic strips that I grew up loving and less about the fantasy novels that I was obsessing over at the time. And again, like I said, I was a constant doodler. I had sketchbooks with me at all times. I drew over every single notebook, every single Post-it note. I was always drawing little characters. So the key for me was just turning those doodles into more definitive characters, and yet trying to keep something that that still kind of looked like doodles. I didn't want them to look like real people. I wanted them to be cute. I wanted them to be simple. And And drawing these characters, I started getting stories based on these characters. And that basically is what became Astronaut Academy Zero Gravity, which almost 11 years after graduating art school is finally my first full-length graphic novel as a writer and an artist. And just real quickly, for those of you who have not read it, because it just came out last week, it is about a boy named Hakata Soy, who is a space hero who has to go to school in outer space. So he goes to Astronaut Academy, which is tops with the learning. It is a school with a very diverse curriculum. You can take classes in advanced heart studies, anti-gravity gymnastics, wearing cute hats, fire throwing, run-on sentences, and the dreaded locker. Teachers include bunnies, magical elves, and Spanish-speaking pandas. And you can take extracurricular classes in dinosaur driving and fireball, which is the most popular sport in the future. So Hakata Soy, he's the new kid in school. He's trying to make friends, but he's got this mysterious past that he's trying to keep a secret because he doesn't want to get anybody hurt, which is smart because there's actually an evil robot clone of Hakata that has been sent to school to destroy him if he doesn't get distracted. So I work the same way as Raina in that I use pencils, paper to lay out my art, and then I use a brush to ink. Originally, I used to use pens, and then when I met Raina, she insisted, much the way that Joey Cavalieri insisted, that I use a brush. And it was actually very scary at first. It was taking me out of my comfort zone. But I think that my art also improved a lot using the brush. So we should probably have like stock in the brush company because now we're becoming, but one of the great things about brushes is that you can really not only work faster, but you can do this really great thick to thin lines, which I'm a huge fan of. So yes, so finally, part 3, stuff we like about comics. This is like preaching to the converted in this room, I think. Number 1, comics bring people together. The coolest thing about comics is that there are comic conventions all the time, and they're happening more and more frequently. And it used to be that you had to travel to crazy places like San Diego or New York to go to a comic convention, but now they're popping up everywhere, even as close as Chelsea, Michigan, I hear. Raina and I go to a lot of comic conventions together. We usually rent a table, sell our comics. It's a great opportunity to meet other cartoonists, meet people that are interested in comics, talk shop, exchange ideas, get excited about the medium. These are friends of ours that we go to a lot of comic book conventions with. And I, blush, actually proposed to Raina in the form of a comic. This is a comic that I drew specifically for her about our lives that had a sort of cliffhanger ending, and Raina drew the last few panels where she had to say yes or no in comic book format.
We were on an airplane when he gave this to me, by the way.
Yes.
It's online, if you want to read it.
So this will get very personal. So when we decided to get married and we started planning our wedding, we realized, you know, this is our chance to sort of finally connect with our family and our friends. You know, like so many people in our lives are cartoonists, so many people in our lives make comics that are our friends, but most of our family had no idea what we did. You know, they still were like, what are comics? We don't really get it. It's like, you know.
Your family.
Yeah, well, yeah. Raina's family is like 5 people. My family's like 80 people. So. So this was sort of an opportunity to sort of like share not only our love for each other, but our love of comics with our family. So we got a lot of cartoonist friends to create art and actually to share with my family. And we actually made a little gift book that was a comic book featuring fan art and little short stories about our lives. This was a piece done by R. Sikoriak, who did Masterpiece Comics, drawing us as Peanuts characters. Craig Thompson, who I worked with a lot, and Kazu Kibuishi, who does the Amulet series. And what's really cute is he drew other cartooning couples there at the bottom.
Brian Lee O'Malley and Hope Larson. And then Kazu and his wife Amy, and then our friend Keen, who draws Jody.
Yeah, and you'll notice that he's not with anybody else. He broke up with his girlfriend not long after that. our table place, what do they call that? Table settings actually had comic strips that were comic strips that we were huge fans of growing up. And even the numbers had like little cartoon characters. And rather than just have a photographer at our wedding, we actually had a journal cartoonist, an artist who does journal comics. Todd Webb he used to draw comics about his life, every day, and we had invited him to our wedding to draw comics about things that were going on at the wedding and make them and immortalize them in comic form. Yes, moving on. So comics encourage unique artistic voices. You guys know this. So much diversity in comics, from realistic art to realistic art about cats, to expressive kids doing crazy things. Are they human? Are they alien? We don't know. To cartoonists who can do amazing stories with just stick figures. And even characters like Batman. Everybody knows Batman. And yet, one of the things that I really love about comic books is that every artist brings their own sort of take to the character. In animation, it's your job to hide yourself and make everything look exactly the same. In comic books, whether it's Bob Kane or Carmine Infantino or Jim Lee, you can recognize their art by what they bring to it. They're not hiding themselves, they're expressing themselves. And it's something that you really only see in comics. This is SpongeBob SquarePants, who is a very popular TV show character. So I got to be an editor at SpongeBob Comics, and one of the great things about that was that we got to have a little bit of fun and let the artists sort of bring themselves to the page. So this is an example of a SpongeBob comic that's obviously trying to look like the show, which is great, that's fine. But we also did comics like this, where James Kachalka was not trying to hide his own James Kachalka-ness. James Kachalka is an artist who does a comic called Johnny Boo and Pinky and Stinky and a million other things. That is very James Kachalka, but it's also SpongeBob. This is an artist named Kaz, who's known for doing really underground comics. This one actually gave a few kids nightmares. We got a couple of letters about it. This is us pushing it maybe a little too far, but it's worth reading if you can ever track it down. Obviously, this is SpongeBob comic channeling Jack Kirby and the Fantastic Four. Sort of channeling like Lisa Frank's Stationery and My Little Pony and things like that. And then this was actually done by an artist named Mark Crilly, who's pretty local here, drawing in a very obviously like a manga Japanese comic style. So comics also encourage collaboration.
Yes, they do. This is where we get to tell you about the collaboration that Dave and I did with a manga artist named Anzu on a book called X-Men Misfits, which was perhaps the strangest project we've ever been involved with. The way the editors presented it to us was, what do you get when you cross a comic book superhero series like the X-Men with a shoujo manga like Fruits Basket? And it was up to us to come up with the answer to that question as the writers. So we chose Kitty Pryde as the subject of the comic because she's a teenager, she's kind of like a superhero, she's got these awesome powers, but we wanted her to be a schoolgirl too at a private school, so these were my sketches that I gave to the artist. Even though I wasn't going to be drawing this book, I had a way that I saw Kitty, I had a way that we sort of envisioned her. So I sent these sketches to the artist, and then this is what the artist sent back to me as her version of the same character. So, yeah, collaboration is awesome because you get stuff you would never expect to get. And so a couple more side-by-sides of Raina versions of characters and Anzu versions of characters. And with the character the Beast, who's very brawny, classic, superhero dude, we thought it'd be funny to combine him with a Totoro. So Anzu's version of the Beast looks like this, which was super awesome. And so Anzu's pages all looked like this. They were full of sparkles and flowers and shoujo tropes that neither one of us can really draw, but that she can draw, and we had a ton of fun with it.
So one of the other things that we really love, comics are easy to make. I don't know how to make a video game. If I think I could figure out how to make a movie, but it would involve like
other people,
50 people and money and stuff. Like I said, we started making comics with just paper and staples. And people always ask, like, how do you break into comics? How do you break into comics? What's the secret? You just make them. And kids can make them, adults can make them. Nothing, the barrier to entry is so, it's like there's no breaking in. It's like you can just decide that you're a cartoonist. And I don't think there's any other industry that that's the case. An artist named Jean Yang was telling a great story about how, in publishing prose, like self-publishing is like, that's weird and nobody's not sure what to think of you if you self-publish. But in comics, it's totally cool, and there's nothing, like there's no stigma against it. If anything, it's actually kind of punk rock. And again, it's infectious. So Staples, photocopier, everybody knows somebody who has access to a photocopier. My first comics were photocopied by my mom, and then I photocopied them at the library, and then at school. And so we do a lot of comic classes, teaching kids how to make comics and working with kids to make comics. And we have found that comics get people excited. People love to talk about comics. People love to draw comics. People love to read comics. We constantly hear from teachers, these kids that never talk in class, they're usually super quiet. Once you start talking about comics, everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody's excited. Everybody wants to draw. Even if they don't feel confident as an artist or don't think of themselves as an artist, we were showing Matt Fizzell. I think Matt Fizzell is really empowering as an artist to show people, because it tells you that you can tell stories with stick figures, with anything. And as long as you're clear and as long as you have a story to tell, comics will let you in. These are just some more photos of kids drawing comics with us. So, kids read comics. Teens read comics. Everyone should read comics. Because comics are great, in case you have not heard. Props to Jersey Joe's in the podcast. And yes, so we will be at Kids Read Comics this weekend in Chelsea, Michigan, and I hope that you guys will all be there. I know some of you will be there, but I hope everyone will be there, and tell your friends, because it should be awesome. And you can find out more about us at comicsbakery.com. So hooray. I'm going to need a volunteer from the audience. Do you want to help me get a volunteer?
Yes. How about you in the back, who had your hand up first? Come on up.
Okay, and I think we're going to need a microphone for the volunteer.
Another microphone. Or should we just grab one of the ones over here? Okay.
Okay.
What's your name? Hi, Will. This is Will. So Will's going to help us read from Astronaut Academy. So Dave, do you want to
Okay.
intro this?
Brandon, do you want to be Monique?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so you just got to be in a place where you can read the screen. Okay, so you will be Malik Mehendel, and so the story takes place at Astronaut Academy. Told you a little bit about that. Like many schools, there's a new kid, there's a jock, there's a mean girl, there's a geek, and there are evil villains. Our story begins where many good stories begin. Welcome to the library. One must be careful in a place with this many books. Interesting characters could be lurking around every corner. Monique, Martin, and Tomcat are Team Feety Pajamas. They terrorize Astronaut Academy. Have you ever stared at darkness straight in the face? La 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 la, I'm ignoring you. You cannot ignore the very source of evil omnipresent. Watch me. No, you watch me and cower in fear. Now, kneel before your new master. Shh. Shh is not a word understood by villains. Martin. Oh, you want to do it?
Martin, perhaps then you should look up the word shh in the dictionary section. Also, please don't sit on the floor without a reading mat.
I'm sorry, Miss Noche. But Tomcat isn't. Bears aren't afraid of authority. They follow their own laws. Dark, scary, furry laws.
Did it work? Were you able to gather up any minions?
I almost had one in my grasp. But then I got yelled at by the librarian.
Why is she always meddling in our affairs? Aren't librarians supposed to be smart? Don't they read? They should know us. They should know better than to cross us.
Yeah, hasn't she heard our theme song?
Probably not.
Then we should sing it. I like to sing.
Okay. We scour the earth and also the space, knocking down fools who step in our face.
We'll torment your life, fill it up with despair, for you've never known fury like the will of a bear. He is our mascot, sharp teeth be our guide. If you see us coming, I advise you to hide. Team Feety Pajamas, our name is renowned. When it comes to bad stuff, you know we are down.
Monique.
Martin. And Tomcat. That's you.
Were you both just singing?
What of it?
Nothing, I guess. Just be careful is all.
Wait, what are you doing?
Me, just taking out this book. It's really good.
Yeah, I know. That's why we were going to take it out.
We were?
Yes.
Sweet.
Be sure to bring it back the first week after the break.
You got it, Miss Noche.
Grr, how selfish. Now we have to wait 3 whole weeks before we can read that book. Excuse me, what was that previous customer's name? Customer? Oh, you mean Malik. Thanks for cooperating. You just got back on my good side. Enjoy that while it lasts, librarian. Malik, on the other hand, should consider himself a walking target, awaiting retribution from Team Feety Pajamas.
Oops. The end.
So, Will, as a token of appreciation, you get a prize.
For helping us with Astronaut Academy, you get a space food stick. So I'm going to need 2 more volunteers. And it's 2 girl characters. So it can be a boy as long as they're okay playing a girl character. So I see 1 girl raising her hand. You should come on up. And is there a girl or is there someone who doesn't mind being a girl, or a girl who's happy being a girl? I see a boy back there who's confident in his own masculinity, and I appreciate that.
You can use that mic.
There's a space food stick in it for you. Okay, so you guys both are mic'd and ready.
Who's who?
Okay, so we've got 2 major characters here, Mayumi-san and Maribel Melonbelly. Who would like to be Mayumi-san? Raise your hand, quick. Okay, you're Mayumi, and you are Maribel Melonbelly. Okay, all you need to know about these kids, Maribel's sort of like the nice girl.
No.
Mayumi-san is sort of like the nice girl, and Maribel is sort of like the mean girl. You'll see in a sec. Yes. And I'm going to play the teacher and other side characters. No, it's just the 3 of us. All right. So, Mayumi.
My name is Mayumi-san, and I go to Astronaut Academy.
Okay, class. Today begins your dinosaur driving lessons.
Boring. Boring. I've been drawing a dinosaur since kindergarten.
Blah, that Maribel Melonbelly so plays the snob role.
I'll play that girl. I guess it pays since she's the daughter of a wealthy business tycoon.
Well, rich people often make big mistakes. I would love to see her fall on her face, which is smug.
Oh, Mayumi, you are so mean, but in the best way, which is fun. Enough jibber jabber. It's time to pick your dinosaurs. Hurry before they become extinct again. So this is the moon roof on the top of the school that opens up, exposing the star field on the moon roof.
Wow, so many to choose from. Makes it hard to decide, for me. I like this one, but I hope he's not stupid.
Slurp.
You must be smart because you knew I'd taste good. That makes us friends.
Oh, that's you.
Nice dinosaur. He matches you and your pea-sized brain, which I have to often compare to small things that are small and useless.
Hey, that insult is unfair since you've never seen my brain and have just met this dinosaur.
I would take it back except for that it's true. And the truth lives on.
If you think your brain is so great, then maybe you can beat me in a race. But I doubt it, since you're so slow.
You can't say things like that to me. I'm rich, and I'll race you to prove how smart I am.
Deal.
Deal.
Let the race begin.
Giddy up, Dino.
Wait, you cannot race. It is only your first lesson. And besides, it is my job to say, let the race begin, since I am the one with the teacher's degree.
Then say it, because this contest has to be official so the world can know that I'm legally the best.
Oh, okay then. Let the race begin now.
Haha, that's my winner's laugh.
Zoom, chugga, 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 chugga.
Okay, this is the part of the story where the overconfident, bragging blonde girl slips up. Oh, please, crash into rock, please.
She probably thinks because I'm rich, I'm also naive from being brought up, pampered, but I know what's up.
How exciting. We should be placing bets so we can profit from this race. That's next week's lesson, Munchie. I can't look. Did Mayumi win yet? It looks like my Arabelle's in the lead. So crazy.
No!
Yes, I am the fastest. I am the smartest and fastest girl in the all astronomy academy. Bask in my glowing glory.
You guys are killing me. This makes no sense. I thought good was supposed to prevail.
I can't believe that I could be such a loser.
Not so fast. Just because Maribel crossed the finish line, that does not make her a true winner.
What? How can this be?
Nope. You see, class, Maribel forgot the most important part of dinosaur driving, wearing your cute little hat. Which is why Mayumi wins the race and gets an A+ for being smart.
Hooray! Justice is served.
Photo finish! A round of applause for our two volunteers. Space Stick Screamers! Woo! All right. So one last reading, for now anyway, because we're going to do another Avatar: The Last Airbender reading as part of the Avatar: The Last Puppet Bender big finale in a bit. So smile. So Raina, do you want volunteers for your?
Yeah, let's see. How about 2 volunteers? You had your hand up for a while, so how about you? Come on up. Another volunteer? Okay, you were so good, so come on back. Okay, I need one person who's going to be Raina, which is the main character in the story, and then one person to be miscellaneous friends and relatives. Sure. You can use that microphone if you like. And so you'll be friends, a mother, and I'm going to play the ear-piercing guy.
That's me. Always the assorted gumball machine.
Hey, that's nothing to sneeze at. Okay, so I introduced Smile already, but I'll introduce it again. Oh, wait, no, just kidding. We're going to go right into the story, which is called Braces and Earrings. Starts with you.
Time to open your presents.
Earrings. Earrings.
Ooh, cute.
Earrings. Now you have to let me get my ears pierced, Mom.
I know. When do you get your braces, Raina?
Friday.
What about your ears? When do you get them pierced?
About a week later.
Cool, so you'll look normal soon?
Back up the orthodontist. Twist, push, yank, shove, twist, 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 scrape, tighten, pull, twist, twist.
That's it!
Braces work through subtle pressure. Little by little, the pressure is increased.
Kinda weird, huh?
Yeah.
And little by little, teeth move.
My lips aren't used to them yet.
You may experience slight discomfort during this time.
Touch.
Ow! 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 Ow!
Mashed potatoes.
Ow! Ow! My whole head hurts so much.
Why don't you bang it against the wall a few times? That way, when you stop banging, it'll hurt less.
Thanks for the sympathy, Dad.
Oh, come on. Let's go see a movie or something. Want to come, Will?
Yeah. Can we get popcorn, Daddy?
Raina's not supposed to eat popcorn while she has her braces.
It's okay. Will can still have some. I'm not that into popcorn anyway.
Ask me that.
Of course, the second you can't have something, it starts to smell amazing. Ow.
Oatmeal.
Raina, are you sure you want to get your ears pierced today?
Sure, I'm sure.
Okay, I just wondered because your teeth are hurting you so much.
Mom! It's different. I didn't really want braces, but I want earrings.
Okay.
So what if I'm afraid of needles? I want to do this. I think.
We do the piercing with these ones.
Okay.
We draw dots where earring goes. Now we pierce. Take deep breath. Chagunk. Chagunk. Done. See? Very pretty.
That didn't even hurt that much, Mom.
That's good.
Saline to keep them moist. Antibacterial ointment so it doesn't get infection.
I'm starting to feel like a real teenager.
The
Yay. Thank you, guys.
end.
Don't go away
For
yet.
now.
We have a prize for each of you.
Get
It's a Nickelodeon Magazine.
Oh,
Haha. Take the microphones back. Thank you guys very much.
Can I adopt you? You're awesome.
Woo.
So we have a few minutes left. I think if we could get the lights up, we're done with the slideshow parts. I think Raina's going to do a little bit of drawing for you guys, and then we can answer some questions. And then there's a short break. We're going to go. We can sign books for anybody who's got books that would like to be signed or doodled in.
And they're selling books.
And they're selling
If you'd like
books
to buy a
that we
book.
can sign and doodle in. And then I hope you'll stick around for the big grand finale with Kevin Copa and Avatar: The Last Puppet Bender. So I'm going to take a step back and let you do your thing.
Yes. So, as far as drawing comics goes, my favorite part about it is being able to draw people doing lots of different stuff. And that I don't think so. So people with many different expressions on their face. It's my favorite thing. I used to love reading Calvin and Hobbes because Calvin always had these great looks on his face, and you could always tell if he was disgusted or if he was delighted by something or if he was scared of something just by the look on his face. So I love facial expressions. And there's a couple of very basic facial expressions that most people can think of. This is one of them. What's the other one? Most people think of happy and sad. Right, but in between happy and sad, there's a lot of other territory to cover. So I'm wondering if you guys can suggest some facial expressions for me, and I will attempt to draw them. Oh, just give me a suggestion.
So, in this one Calvin and Hobbes comic, there was a look like this.
What was he thinking? Was he annoyed? Was he sad? Was he scared?
He just listened to a radio station, which was Boomer 102 Classic Rock, and they said, "We'll get back to those high school days when your world stopped. But first, here's our critic to review the latest movie based on a 60s or 70s TV show."
So skepticism. Okay. So if I heard that, I think this is probably my expression just now. Maybe? That might be how I draw skeptic. Okay, a suggestion. It could be just one word. Perplexed. I like that. Let's do perplexed. I'm going to draw some wide eyes and one eye sort of as like a sad eyebrow, and then one up like that, and then maybe even like he's like squinting his eye, and then another like mouth like this, and then I'm going to put this person's hands up in sort of a shrug, as if to be like, I just don't get it. Is the mic still on, by the way? Can you guys hear me? Okay, can't tell. And then I'm going to put like a question mark above his head. Like that. That's how I would draw perplexed. All right, another suggestion for an expression. Disgusted. That sounds like fun. All right, I will do the eyes squinted like this, and the eyebrows pointed down like this in utter disgust. And then a person's open mouth with the tongue sticking out like this. And if you wanted to get into noses, you could do a nose that was kind of wrinkled up like this, but that's hard to draw, so I'm just going to stick to eyes and mouths to convey the expression. That would be disgust. Scheming. Ooh. When I think of scheming, I think of Mr. Burns going like this. So that's what I'm going to draw. So someone who's looking off to the side. And then again, it's sort of maybe like evil eyebrows, but a smile on the evil eyebrows. And then the hands sort of conspiratorially pointed together towards the center and wiggling as such. And can you guys all see, even though there's a podium here? Cool. Okay, let's do a couple more of these. Forced enthusiasm. All right. How about bugging out eyes, and then sort of like, they could be sad eyebrows, but they're not in this case. They are a person who is like, like that. Yeah, there's probably a couple of different ways you could do it, but that'd be my first shot at it. Another idea for an expression. Nirvana. Not the band, but the happy, like sort of like a meditative om sort of thing. Maybe their eyes are closed, so upside down U's. And then a smile on their face and very pleasant eyebrows. And maybe they're dreaming of the most wonderful thing. And I'm going to leave that blank so that you can imagine what the most wonderful thing would be. Okay, another expression. Irritated. That doesn't go with nirvana at all. It's the opposite of nirvana. Okay, irritated, angry eyebrows, and sort of a small mad mouth like this, but I'm going to draw this person crossing their arms like this. And then, even though I'm running out of space here, I'll just sort of make him a midget. He's like, he's tapping his foot because he's irritated. He's maybe waiting in line for something that hasn't happened yet. And he's also really beefy because he's got such a short body, so he's a bodybuilder. All right, another expression. Let's do 2 more of these things. Super excited. Oh, sorry. Can I do his person, then I'll do super excited after that? Okay. Crazy, mega excited. All right, well, we're just going to combine them all. I like that too. Okay, for excited, I'll do excited and then I'll do crazy, mega excited. I would do like a person with the closed eyes and the open mouth and the cheering position like this. And then to make them crazy excited, I would do the same pose, but I would do like crossed eyes, the open mouth, and maybe the tongue again sticking out. And then maybe instead of the straight up arms, we'll do this person like waving their arms all over the place because they are. And what should this person be saying? Yahoo! So you really just start to combine pictures, and for me it's very simple pictures, but you can sort of apply these simple faces to just about any type of style. And then putting word balloons in there sometimes just to sort of amp it up a little bit more. Okay, let's do one more. Who's got a whammy for me? Pensive. Sorry? Pensive. Okay. A good high note to end on. Pensive. That's sort of like thoughtful, right? Or is that sort of like a worried thoughtful? Like, Okay. So, is that the, okay. Dot, dot, dot. All right, so expressions, hooray! You can play this game at home with your friends. So that's kind of the end of our presentation, but we have a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask us.
About comics, cartoons, cartoonists.
Being married to a cartoonist. And if not, we will be hanging around for the rest of the evening. We're going to be signing books, and Dave is going to be joining Kevin on stage in a little while for Avatar: The Last Puppet Bender. So if you guys want to come and chat during the break, that's awesome.
And thanks to the Ann Arbor Library for setting this up, and thanks to Vault of Midnight who have books in the back, and see you in a bit.
See you tomorrow at Kids Read Comics in Chelsea. Thank you.